There was?
Yeah. Shalom, shalom to those listening on Clubhouse as well as on YouTube Live. Tonight's lesson entails the laws of uncleanliness that I will be going into pertaining to Leviticus chapter 12 and Leviticus chapter 15. Both chapters deal with male and female, and they also deal with child and children when childbearing takes place with the woman when she gives birth to a baby girl, and also when she gives birth to a baby boy. So tonight's lesson entails those two chapters, and we will extensively be reviewing the reproductive system and the male and female genitalia and the purposes of what the Lord set forth pertaining to these laws and statutes and commandments that he has given us by the wisdom and by the mouth and hand of Moses. So again, those are the chapters that we will be going into tonight. Those are the chapters we will be exegeting and going into. So that entails tonight's lesson. With that, this is Mark chapter 12 and verse 29. YHWH answered, the first of all commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. SHAMI YASHARAHLA, AHLAHAYANAWA, ACHAAD, Aman. All right, so my first time doing this. Those of you that are on Clubhouse can gladly click the link above to join the YouTube and watch it live for the visuals. But if not, I open up this room on Clubhouse, which I will be doing a lot more for the audio listeners who are not able to. So with that being said, we're now going to get into the lesson. So let's hold off and get to the book of Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 1. And of course, I have my readers. So before we get into the lesson, what's important for everyone to understand is that the Lord, in giving us his law, has given us every single aspect of law that you can imagine. He gave us legislative, he gave us civil, he gave us military, he gave us political. And the one part and aspect of the law that's not particularly expounded on enough is the sexual education and aspect of the law that he also gave us. So the reason why I'm going into this tonight particularly is so that we understand that all parts and certain parts of the law may seem not so much gone into that have to be expounded upon and exegeted so that we can understand the law in its entirety was given to us in the manner that it was so that we understand and we know for sure ourselves that every aspect of the law was given to us by the hand of Moses, given to him by the Most High God. So with that being said, we're going to begin in Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 1. Oh, before you read, keeping in mind Leviticus chapter 12 is after chapter 11, which outlines the dietary law, and the dietary law particularly outlines clean and unclean meats and animals and everything that entails the dietary law the Lord gave us that we can consume and what's edible for us and what's not edible. So keep in mind the theme to uncleanliness and what's clean is what's being gone over, particularly within the themes of these chapters. Go ahead.
It's the book of Leviticus, chapter 12, verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days.
Go ahead.
According to the days of the separation for her infirmity shall she be unclean.
Go ahead.
And in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised.
Now we're going to make and mark a division within this chapter. So I wrote on the board here for Leviticus 12, this deals with childbirth. And it says male child. Now, of course, we know the range of pregnancy ranges from roughly 8 to 10 months. And we know that particularly within the law that we just read, circumcision takes place with baby boys, and the period of separation for a woman being 40 days, which is the number of days she's supposed to be separate and cannot come into cannot come unto the tabernacle for the state of impurity that she is currently in, which marks these days that she is separated from the community, or necessarily separate from the tabernacle and separate from the people. And the reason why it says unclean 7 days, according to the days of separation for her infirmity, what this is referring to is the menstrual period and the type of, how can I put it, what can I say, the 7 days that she's supposed to be separate according to her cycle. It's in the same manner of 7 days following childbirth, and she's also supposed to be separate when she has a boy. So with that being said, it says in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Now we know that the law of circumcision was given to Abraham, and we are supposed to circumcise our male children on the 8th day, which is actually backed up and proven by science why we should, only proving the deep wisdoms and the profoundness of the Most High. And on the 8th day, the flesh of this foreskin shall be circumcised. We're going to actually get in the book of Genesis chapter 17, where this was commanded of us, in Genesis chapter 17 and verse 13.
It's the book of Genesis, chapter 17, verse 13. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant.
For an everlasting covenant, and this is why the law was given to us by Moses. Go ahead.
And the uncircumcised man, child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people.
Now, cut off doesn't have to ultimately mean death, but it can mean you don't partake necessarily in being congregated with the Lord's people for the particular purpose that you're not circumcised. And cutting off also deals with reputation. It also deals with you not being able to even have a family tree. So the Lord doesn't always mean when he says cut off that you'll just be put to death. That's not the case. That's the ultimate form of being cut off, like what had happened with Eli, the high priest in the book of Samuel, Saul, and his lineage not being on the throne. That could be the ultimate price you pay in consequence being cut off, but cut off doesn't always necessarily point or mean death. So now let's get back to the book of Leviticus chapter 12. And now let's read verse 4.
Verse 4. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days.
Go ahead.
She shall touch no hollow thing, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purifying be fulfilled.
Now it says she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days, and shall touch no hollow thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. What this is talking about or referring to is what's called the postpartum, or the term is called lochia, which refers to the blood and the discharge that the vagina releases after childbirth. And we're going to read articles on this shortly. The reason why the Lord is saying this is because the woman is to be separate at this particular time for the impure state that she's in. Now, I am going to emphasize tonight that impure does not equate to sin, because the Lord gave us the commandment from the very beginning in the book of Genesis, be fruitful and multiply. So it wouldn't make sense that the Lord says that we are supposed to bear forth children and then we're sinning by doing so. That's not the case. So I don't want everyone to get mixed up on the terminology, particularly with how everything is being worded and being said. So go ahead with verse 5.
Verse 5. But if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks.
So 14 days unclean, as if she's on her menstrual cycle. Go ahead.
As in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days.
Now, there's a reason for this. And for you sisters, because I know that there's going to be heavy sister attendance with the comments in the chat, and for brothers that are fathers, verse 4 says that she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days, and she shall touch no hollow thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. That's for both male child and female child. So what this is saying is 40 days for the male child shall she continue in purifying, which is why it says 33 days, and then she is unclean for 7 days, giving birth to a male child. And then, but if she bear a maid child, meaning a girl, She shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation. The separation is signifying the menstrual cycle, or what's known today as the period. And she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days, which in total equals to 80 days. So the whole process of a male coming forth from a woman's birth canal is 40 days. For a female child, it's 80 days. And there's a scientific reasoning backup as to why the period doubles for girls compared to boys. So now what I'm going to do is bring up these articles and these notes to back up the science that the wisdom expounded upon out of the law has given us. So the first article I'm going to pull up is from circumcision from childrenshospital.org. What I want everyone to keep in mind of tonight is that the Lord's simplicity in telling us and commanding us to do these certain things, and him telling us to do what he had commanded us, goes deeper than what it is that we read, right? So, again, this is from childrenshospital.org. This is circumcision. It says, what is a circumcision? Circumcision is a surgical procedure to remove the skin covering of the end of the penis called the foreskin. In many cultures, circumcision is a religious rite or ceremonial tradition. It is most common in Jewish and Islamic faiths. In the United States, newborn circumcision is an elective procedure. The National Center for Health Statistics estimate that about 64% of newborn boys undergo circumcision. However, this number varies among socioeconomic, ethnic, and geographic groups. Now, it goes on to say that circumcision can be done at any age. We know that the Lord commanded us the 8th day from when the child is born. That's when it's supposed to be done. So some people choose to do it later on in life. Some parents choose not to get their children circumcised at all. If you are uncircumcised male, for what your age is, you should get the procedure done, because it is the covenant that was given to Abraham, and it is a sign of the contract and covenant that the Lord had signed with Abraham and commanding him to tell us to do this. Now, this is the beautiful aspect, right? This is the science behind the law. This is what are the potential benefits of circumcision. If your baby is circumcised, the penis becomes easier to clean for parents and ultimately for the child, which helps them, not just us as parents, which helps reduce the risk of infection from bacteria. Other potential benefits include near elimination of lifetime risk of penile cancer, more than 90% reduction of the risk of urinary tract infections during infancy, reduced incidence of balanitis, which is an infection of the glands or head of the penis, and posthitis, an infection of the prepuce, which is the skin covering of the head of the penis. It is also eliminates the elimination of phimosis, which is an ability to retract the foreskin, meaning not able to pull it back. It says most researchers generally accept that circumcised men are less likely to acquire and transmit HIV and some sexually transmitted diseases. However, if your child is not circumcised, he could do well by learning to fully pull back his foreskin around the time of the toilet training and take care to keep his entire penis clean with soap and water every day. But you wouldn't have to worry about that simply, as I just read, if you just circumcise your children as the Lord had commanded. So, with that being said, and this science backing up as to why, once again, the Lord had commanded that we circumcise our children, now what we're going to do is read some award-winning evidence as to why the Lord said circumcise on the 8th day. So this next article from researchgate.net, it's a PDF. Kind of just simply gives an abstract on why circumcising the 8th day is important. See, and the person that made this actually quoted from the scripture. The person wrote, not by the brother has it up, wait for him. So the person wrote, and he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man in your generation. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger, which is not your seed, according to Genesis 17:12, the King James Version, Male circumcision is a surgical removal of the foreskin covering the penis. It is one of the oldest operations known. Circumcision is the rule rather than an exception within all Nigerian ethnic groups and religion. The review is a critical evaluation of the relationship between some hemostatic parameters associated with circumcision of male infants. The main risk associated with this procedure is hematologic, which is bleeding. Several benefits of male circumcision include medical reasons as a treatment for tight skin, phimosis, paraphimosis, which is inability of the foreskin to return to its original position after being pulled back. So it is also reduction of the risk of HIV transmitting cervical HPV, which is human papillomavirus, improved sexual pleasure, increased penile vaginal contact, stimulation, and marginally better staying power during penetrative sex. It is of significant medical importance that male circumcision be carried out on the 8th day after birth, since the level of vitamin K is the highest on this day, and vitamin K plays a pivotal role in regulation and control of the important clotting factors in the coagulation pathway that helps in stopping the bleeding. So, if you understand this, the reason why the Lord said to circumcise on the 8th day is for the fact that this particular vitamin is in complete abundance to help stop the bleeding, and the male genitalia, the penis for the baby, is at its most bloated and highest point, to where you can cut around the foreskin of the penis and completely secure that your child is safely circumcised as the Lord had commanded. So, with that being said, again, read this last article on circumcision on the 8th day. This next article get it together. There we go. So, this is from evidenceforthebible.com. Again, this is also more proof, and this is also more reasoning as to why the Lord said that males should be circumcised on the 8th day. So it says scientific evidence for circumcision on the 8th day. It says circumcision is the removing of the male foreskin, and as a consequence, it is a rather bloody process. Therefore, here we provide scientific evidence for why circumcision has to be on the 8th day. It says 4,000 years ago, YHWH instructed Abraham to circumcise males on the 8th day. We read this according to Genesis 17. Abraham followed this prescription with his son Isaac in Genesis chapter 21 and verse 4. It says some 600 years later, YHWH gave Moses the same instruction for the Israelites. Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 3, which we just read. It says, why did YHWH order circumcision on the 8th day for Abraham's male descendants? Why not sooner or later? Why did it need to be on the 8th day? Now, if you're looking at this chart here, for vitamin K production that babies make, you see that it clearly is at its highest point on the 8th day. So vitamin K and prothrombin are at its maximum peak when you have the 8th day in, looking at how much vitamin K is produced by the baby at that particular time, and you can evidently see that it being at its height. This is why the Lord said the 8th day should be the day that you circumcise your baby and your children. So, with that being said, as all of you can see, I'm going to continue reading. It says, in the 1930s, Danish researcher Henrik Dam and American researcher Edward Doisy found that which was required for blood to clot. They shared the 1943 Nobel Prize in Medicine for this research. The human body has two blood clotting elements. One of them is called vitamin K. Vitamin K is not formed in the body until the 5th to the 7th day. The second clotting factor, which is essential, is called prothrombin. It surprisingly enough develops to 30% of normal by the 3rd day of life, and after that, which seeming in consequence, peaks at 110% on the 8th day, just before leveling off at 100% of normal. If vitamin K is not present when the baby boy is circumcised, the baby will bleed to death. The reason why YHWH established day 8 for circumcision is that the vitamin K peaks in a newborn at 8 days of age. The 8th day is the optimum day for circumcision because of the highest presence of the clotting factor of vitamin K. Today, when the baby boys are circumcised within a couple of days of birth, they are administered vitamin K to help with the blood clotting. So to conclude on this, does everyone understand why he said the 8th day? Like, you see the scientific evidence that's backed by what the Lord had prescribed and told us to do within the law. And then they actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for this research, because what it does behind all the scientific research is back up what the scriptures are saying. Is everyone online following? Those on Clubhouse following? Give a con if so. My child as well, the one thing that they did was administer what I did take, the vitamin K shot, because they know, if anything, for discharge purposes or for any other reasons, if the baby gets hurt, it helps with blood clotting. So now, those particular articles, the good brother AHLAHAYANAWA put them in the chat for everyone. Those particularly deal with a boy. Now, with a girl, it's different. The period for separation for a girl being born is 80 days. The reason why it says 80 days is because women have birth canals or vaginas. Now, the reason for this and why it's doubled is because of the discharge for the vagina, which makes the woman unclean at this particular time from childbirth. The reason why also the period for girls were doubled is because the baby girl can also release discharge from her vagina as well. So the doubling period that the Lord gave a girl compared to a boy is simply and solely for the fact that not would the mother just have to more so emotionally connect to her daughter, but also for the fact that much more care and much more looking out for the baby of the childbirth of having a girl would have to be scrutinized much more than a boy. Because circumcision is all that needs to be done for a boy, but for a girl, you actually need to make sure and be sure that her vagina discharge is normal. Sometimes what they call witch's milk is produced by more often baby girls than boys in most cases. And particularly just inspect the vagina of the girl to make sure that everything is right and, of course, properly in place, nothing is deformed, anything pertaining to that nature. This is why the period doubles for girls than it does boys. So what we're going to do first, before we get into the articles on the girl, AHLAHAYANAWA, can you pull up unclean, H2930 inside the concordance? And all our brothers to understand is that the Hebrew is very important within this particular class as well, so we can not just read the words, but understand why the Lord had set them in place. Now, of course, the good brother has it up. Tama'ah, H2930. So, when you're looking at it, right, and then you go down to the Strong's Concordance, you see that it says unclean. And then it gives the reasons for being unclean. So, of course, you see, you blow it up just a little bit up. So it says to become unclean, to become impure. You can become unclean sexually. You can become unclean ceremonially. You can become unclean by idolatry. And of course, what you see here is that what it means and what it's signifying is that it signifies impurity, not sin. Sin can make you unclean, but these are reasons that you're unclean for things that the Lord had destined and put forth and made you to do. So you're not sinful by having sex and making and producing for children. You're not sinful for that. So unclean, which is also to be foul, especially in a ceremonial or a moral sense. You can also defile yourself. You can also pollute yourself, or to make yourself necessarily in totality unclean. Now, can you pull up separation, which is H5079? Very important to look into these words, that way nobody is reading along and just seeing what this is and then kind of coming to their own conclusions. Unclean, particularly in this context, refers to what it is that the Lord is talking about and referencing when he says it inside this particular chapter, so you can understand the context of why these words are there, and then you can understand more in depth the meaning behind them. So of course the Hebrew word here is nadah. And then of course it says impurity, especially by menstruation. It says idolatry also, it says incest. It says flowers, which represent when a woman is on her menstrual cycle, a menstruous woman. There's also impurity, filthiness, ceremonial impurity, which is the point of this entire chapter. And then it says also to be set apart, because when you're unclean at this particular time, you're separated is for a reason, and you're not around anybody by the commandments that the Lord gave, so that you're not spreading that uncleanliness in the state that you're currently in. And then last one, infirmity, from H17:38. Good brother Kawan is also putting them inside the chat for you guys as well. And the word here is dawa. And going into this, of course it is to be unwell, to feel ill, not in a physical sense, it can be also. But the point of this is, it says to be sick as if in menstruation, in infirmity. And an infirmity also is disease, sickness, it is lack of capability, it is also weakness. It is illness, moral weakness, a want of strength, feebleness. And the point of why I bring this out is to signify particularly what this chapter is outlining, pertaining to a woman giving birth to a boy and a woman also giving birth to a girl. Now I want to emphasize again that as we're going to keep reading, sacrifices are to be made after children are born. But this isn't because sin or anything happened. Again, this is for the reason of the fact that you're in an impure state, so sacrifice must be made so that you are clean and purified once again. So now we read on boys, now we're going to read on girls. So vaginal discharge from birth, right? I want to get this first article. So this is from nct.org.uk. And then you're going to see how this perfectly lines up with the period of when a woman is unclean and she has to separate for 40 days for a boy and then 80 days for a girl. It's roughly estimated between 6 to 8 weeks and or longer that a woman can still be in the process of bleeding. Now, this article emphasizes, it says, bleeding after birth, 10 things you need to know. Every woman bleeds after they give birth. You will have vaginal bleeding after you've given birth. This bleeding is known as lochia. The lochia is a combination of mucus, tissue, and blood that your womb sheds as it replaces its lining after you give birth. And because it's a whole baby, some women give birth to lighter babies, some women give birth to heavier, and then the shedding and everything that comes out with that in the process of the postpartum is the reason why so much blood is coming out. So the reason why it gave the days and the time period for separation is because every baby's different, but it gave this estimation and time period according to the scriptures because not every woman is the same, let alone the fact that if it extends or may be for longer, this is why it gave the 40 days and it gave the 80. So it says, number 2 says, bleeding after birth may last for a while. This is the point. It says, bleeding often lasts for around 4 to 6 weeks, but could last up to 12 weeks after your baby's born. If you're worried, you can talk to a health professional. Now it gives the days, right, going into the weeks of how blood is to be looked at when a woman gives birth. I'll just read it. It says, day 1 says fresh red to reddish brown, reddish to brownish red blood. Heavy flow that probably soaks one maternity pad every few hours with 1 or 2 clots or several smaller ones. Day 2 to 6, darker brown or pinkish red blood. Day 7 to 10, darker brown or pinkish red blood again, becoming lighter. Day 11 to 14, darker brown or pinkish red blood, becoming lighter flow. Week 3 to 4, paler, possibly a creamy white blood loss, lighter flow. Week 5 to 6, brown, pinkish red, or creamy yellow stains, possibly for several weeks, and possibly only on some days. So that's why he said to separate. So now, right, let me go to the next article. So the next article is from verywellfamily.com. This is more on Lokia. Specifically what it is before I give the physical diagram. And you say it's natural, it's part of life now. We have laws on this because we need to emphasize that the Lord also gave us sexual education out of the law. And the point of tonight's class is that all of you can comedically joke and say, back in health class, you didn't laugh, you didn't take it serious. You guys remember seeing penises and scrotums being drawn on in books. Well, now we should take it more serious now because we actually are reading inside of our own law the science and the knowledge that proves what was given to us. So this is Lokia. This is from verywellfamily.com. It says, what is Lokia? Lokia is another name for postpartum vaginal bleeding. This is by Sarah Bradley. Of course, this was medically reviewed, so this is backed up by science and facts. So it says Lokia is also known as postpartum bleeding. It is a normal discharge of blood and mucus from the uterus after childbirth. It begins right after delivery and can continue for 4 to 6 weeks postpartum, with the heaviest flow occurring from the first 10 to 14 days. For some people, lochia may disappear more quickly, while others may have lochia for slightly longer than 4 to 6 weeks. Now, I'm not going to continue reading because I'm going to show a physical, actual picture and diagram of lochia. So what I want to do next, right, is this is the postpartum. Again, this is lochia. This is the blood and the discharge of mucus and everything else that comes out of the vagina after a woman gives birth. So I'll play out in the next section. So we're going to go over postpartum for girls. And the reason why also, again, why the period doubles for a girl is because a woman being more emotionally connected to her daughter as compared to her son, it's not just physical in the sense that the Lord would want the woman to have more time with the baby girl. It's because emotionally a woman is more connected to her daughter because she just gave birth to a life after herself. So because she just gave birth to the same sex, she will be more emotionally connected because she gave birth to her own. Now compared to a boy who's more predominantly made up of testosterone compared to a girl who is predominantly made up of estrogen, which is the predominant female hormone. So this is again from verywellfamily.com. And this is just going over the vaginal discharge. So it says parents, especially first timers, this is also why your baby has vaginal discharge. It says parents, especially first timers, are often taken by surprise when they change their baby's diaper. Poop color and consistency can definitely be unexpected, but so too can what looks like clear or bloody discharge from a newborn baby's vagina. However, newborn vaginal discharge is completely normal and typically stops around 10 days old. Not all newborns experience it, but it is caused by expected hormonal shifts after delivery. That is very important and key because every woman is not only different, every newborn baby is different. And again, in the range of 80 days that the Lord gave for a baby girl, now you see why the span of time is so much more bigger for the time of separation compared to a boy. So it continues to say, during pregnancy, high levels of estrogen and progesterone circulate in the mother's body. These cross the placenta and reach the baby. This is totally normal and not harmful in any way. In fact, some of the hormones are necessary for the baby to develop. In girls, the sudden absence of the high levels of estrogen and progesterone they were used during gestation triggers a response in their body that causes a white and sometimes bloody discharge. The end of pregnancy maternal hormone shift increases levels of oxytocin and prolactin that spur a mother's breast to produce breast milk. Exposure to these hormones in the womb can cause swollen tissue around the nipples in both female and male newborns, resulting in what looks like breast buds, particularly within female girls. In fact, a tiny bit of breast milk may even discharge from a male or female newborn's nipples for a period for up to several weeks. This is why, again, the Lord gave the separation period, to physically check and make sure that everything is fine with the baby. It says newborn vaginal discharge usually disappears on its own by the time your baby is 10 days old. You should call your pediatrician if it persists longer than 2 weeks or becomes yellow or foul smelling, as those symptoms may be a sign of an infection. So now does everyone understand the reason why he said 40 days, 80 days, and he gave the separation and explained circumcision, the scientific, powerful, Nobel Peace Prize winning evidence as to why we are supposed to circumcise on the 8th day, and then why a woman is supposed to separate double the period for 80 days compared to 40? Con? So the next article, the last one on this, is from seattleschildren.org. It says newborn appearance questions, and I'm just going to highlight one, 4, and 5, those particular points, 1, 4, and 5. So breast questions, genital questions for male and female. So point number 1. So again, this is more advice and just more evidence and science behind when your baby is born, what you can do, procedures to take. So care advice for newborn appearance. This is number 1, breast questions, swollen breasts. Swollen breasts are present during the first week of life in many babies. Breasts can be swollen in both girl and boy babies. The nipple area is always firm. The cause is the passage of the mother's estrogen across the placenta. Of course, this is more the case for females, baby girls, than boys, because they are the female, they have the XX chromosomes, and they are made in the image and fashion of a woman, as the Lord had made. Newborn milk. It says sometimes the nipples leak a few drops of milkish discharge. This is normal and can last a few weeks. Normal course, swollen breast often lasts for 2 to 4 weeks. In breastfed babies, some breast swelling can last for 6 months. Caution, never squeeze or massage the breast of the nipple. The reason is because it can cause a serious infection. Call your doctor if the swollen breast develops any redness, streaking, or tenderness. So, Abaya, can you skip down to number 4? Then we'll close it here. So, genital questions pertaining to the female. It says the hymen can be swollen due to maternal estrogen. It can have a smooth, 1-inch thick, 12-millimeter projections of pink tissue. These normal vaginal hymenal tags occur in 10% of newborn girls. They shrink slowly over 2 to 4 weeks. Newborn vaginal bleeding. Baby girls can have some minor vaginal bleeding. It can start at any time from 2 to 10 days of life. This is normal and called a false menses, meaning a false sense or form of a period. So the cause is the sudden drop off in the mother's estrogen, a hormone, after birth. The blood-tinged or pink discharge should not last for more than 3 to 4 days. This is genital questions pertaining to the male. It says swollen scrotum or hydrocele. It says the newborn scrotum can be filled with clear fluid. This fluid is squeezed into the scrotum during the birth process. It slowly goes away over 6 to 12 months. No testicle, which means undescended, meaning it didn't come down. The testicle is not in the scrotum in about 4% of full-term newborns. Many of these testicles gradually descend into the normal position during the following months. By 1 year of age, less than 1% of all testicles are undescended. These need to be brought down surgically, if it's not the case. Tight foreskin. Most babies that aren't circumcised have a tight foreskin. Because of this, you can't see the head of the penis. This is normal in infants. The foreskin should not be pulled back. This is why we are supposed to, and are commanded to, circumcise. A circumcision is the removal of most of the male foreskin. For questions about circumcision, see that care guide, which is referred to the article. So, we're going to stop it here, and we're going to see the scriptural evidence of this particular process and this particular law being followed. Let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 2 and 18.
Book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 18. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart.
So right now we're on the birth of Christ, and that's currently what this story is surrounding as the brother is reading. That's what's happening right now. So they were just shocked that an angel came and told her she'd be having a baby. Joseph slept and lied with her, copulated his seed unto her, because of course he's of a flesh and living man. He's of the seed of David, according to the book of Romans 1 and 3. These are his parents. So now, with this being said, we're reading the story about how she was excited that these things were happening. Go ahead.
Verse 20. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was YHWH.
Go ahead.
Which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb.
So even his parents kept the law. The people who emphasize and don't think that he kept the law, well, his parents did. So it only makes sense that they would teach their own son to keep the law. Go ahead.
Verse 22. And when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were accomplished.
According to the law of what?
According to the law of Moses,
go ahead,
were accomplished, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to Yahweh.
Go ahead.
As it is written in the law of the Lord,
go ahead.
Every male that openeth the womb shall be called holy to the Lord.
Read the last verse. Verse 24.
And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons.
So we read here, right, up until verse 24, that they followed the entire protocol given to us by the law of Moses. His parents followed and kept this. So why aren't we supposed to? And not just that, right? They sacrificed according to the law of Moses. So now let's go back to Leviticus 12 so that can properly be explained. Go to Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 6.
The book of Leviticus chapter 12 verse 6. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled for a son or for a daughter.
This goes for both. Go ahead.
She shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering.
Go ahead.
And a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest.
Go ahead.
Who shall offer it before Yahweh and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood.
Go ahead.
This is the law for her that have borne a male or a female.
Read the last verse.
And if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleaned.
Now, again, I want to emphasize, because all of you are looking at offering, you have to bring it to the priest. You're looking at the word atonement, and you see sin offering. I want to emphasize again, having sex with a woman and copulation of seed to bring forth a child is not sin. When you see sin offering and burnt offering here, it doesn't mean that they sin. These are just sacrifices made according to the law so that she may be atoned for, because when she's separated, if you go back up to verse 4, it says, she shall touch no hollow thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of your purifying be fulfilled. These are made for her. These sacrifices are made for her so that she may be pure again and become a part of society. She may come to the tabernacle, to the temple, and worship. So, to explain, ceremonial defilement or ritual uncleanness did not necessarily mean that the defiled person had sinned. Some practices that resulted in ceremonial uncleanness were not morally wrong in themselves, such as childbearing. Therefore, we must not think sinful when we read unclean. Unclean does not mean sinful, but impure. Impurity restricted the Israelite from participating in corporate worship at the tabernacle. The legislation, however, deals with the secretions that occur at the parturition, childbirth, And it is these that make the mother unclean, not that she sinned, but because of childbirth. It was the understanding of the sacredness of the tabernacle in the temple space that made purification, ritual, and purity essential. So again, to close out this particular chapter, it wasn't, the sacrifices were not made because she had sinned. They were made to make her pure again so that she may be a part of society. She was separated because the God we serve is a holy God. We read holy and just think set apart. No, holy means he is not like everyone else. Holy means he is set apart to the maximum and utmost degree that you could possibly think of. And chapter 15 is only going to prove that point, because when the Lord says to separate for whatever person being unclean, they have to ultimately remove themselves from the rest of the people for a particular purpose and or reason that the law says accordingly. So, Abaya, can you pull up the picture of the lokia? So to close out before we get to chapter 15, I'm going to show the difference in the stages of postpartum bleeding that a woman has and what occurs over the stages and over the weeks of time after she gives birth. Good brother's pulling up the visual for you guys. And again, to give the definition of lokia, it is the postpartum bleeding of a woman after she gives birth. It is most heaviest in its stages in the first week, and then over time, the blood begins to lighten up in color, it begins to be less thicker, and it also begins to dissipate over the weeks and courses of time, so that a woman may be pure again after she has given birth to her child. All right. He's going to pull it up shortly. So it says here in the picture, he's going to pull it up. So lokia has 3 stages. The duration of each stage and the way lokia looks can vary. And of course, again, this is going over the time frame, the time period, from the course of weeks, from the 40 days of a woman with the baby boy again, and then with the baby girl. All right, so there it is. So lokia has 3 stages. The duration of each stage and the way lokia looks can vary. So lokia rubra. Lokia rubra is the first stage of lokia. You can expect dark or bright red blood, lasts 3 to 4 days, flows like a heavy period. Small clots are normal, mild period cramping. Again, this is right after birth. Then the second one, lokia serosa, is the second stage of lokia. You can expect pinkish brown discharge that's less bloody and more watery, lasts 4 to 12 days. Flow is moderate, less clotting, or no clots. Lokia alba is the last stage of lokia. You can expect yellowish white discharge, little to no blood, light flow or spotting. Lasts from 12 days to 6 weeks. There are no clots. So these are the stages that occur after a woman gives birth, and this is what they look like pertaining to the color and what happens in each stage, so that you can understand that, again, to emphasize the point of separation and the point of the uncleanliness for the 2 weeks. And the reason why the Lord had commanded and said all this is for the fact that science proves everything that the law by the hand of Moses given to us by the Most High already proves. All science does is prove the Bible. If none of you have realized that or learned that, that's all science does. Brother Kawan put, I never thought I would learn this. That's the point of tonight's lesson, so that we could actually get more into aspects of the law that aren't really expounded upon. And again, I'll say it. The reason for tonight's lesson is because we have civil education, we have military education, we have legislative education, we have the kind of education that we have military, legislative, economic education as well. And the one aspect of the law that we need to expound on and go in more is the sexual education and the sexual aspects of the law that the Lord had given us. So now that we're done with Leviticus chapter 12, we've gone over the boy, the girl, and the childbirth of each, the days of separation. And then we mentioned and talked about the sacrifices from verses 6 to verse 8 and why they're made. Again, it's not because she had sinned, it's because of the impure state she's in. The sacrifices make her clean and pure again so that she may come and worship at the temple, at the sanctuary, and be present among the people. Now we're going to go over to Leviticus chapter 15.
It's Leviticus chapter 15, verse 1.
Before you read, Apaya, can you pull up the picture I sent you of the whiteboard? That way everyone's able to follow along. I gave an outline to Leviticus 15 in particular because it's broken down into particular portions of the chapter. So when he pulls up the picture, I'm going to have everyone just look at it for a second. I'm going to read it across accordingly, and then just so everyone is able to follow along with how the chapter particularly is broken down. Again, those that are on Clubhouse, if you're able to, you can join and click the link above to, once again, you can click on the link to visually see. So again, the title of the class is The Laws of Uncleanliness, the outline of Leviticus chapter 12 and verse 15. Leviticus 12, we went over it, deals with childbirth, the male child circumcision in 40 days, the female child 80 days. The Hebrew words we're going to get issue within this chapter specifically. And then at the bottom, as all of you can see, there's Leviticus chapter 15. So Leviticus chapter 15, from verse 1 to verses 15, this deals with issue and discharge of the flesh. Leviticus chapter, well, all of this one chapter. From verses 16 to 18, it deals with sexual intercourse. From verses 19 to 24, it deals with the menstrual cycle. And then from verses 25 to 30, it deals also again with the menstrual cycle, but extended. And then, of course, the last verses in the chapter, verses 31 to verse 33, is the conclusion of the chapter. So now let's get into it. Leviticus chapter 15.
It's the book of Leviticus, chapter 15, verse 1.
Go ahead.
And Yahweh spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when any man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue he is unclean. And this shall be his uncleanness and his issue. Whether his flesh run with his issue, or his flesh be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanness.
So, again, the reason why I gave you guys the outline of this chapter is because this context is specific. And again, the outline of the class is dealing with male and female genitalia. So, as all of you can see from verses 1 to 15, this is issue, this is discharge of the flesh. What this particularly is talking about is sexually transmitted diseases and infections. This is expounded upon in our law. This is the point of tonight's lesson so that all of you can understand when you're reading the law, don't just read it from the naked eye. You actually have to go into it so that you can see the wisdom that was given and expounded unto Moses. Again, all science does is prove the Most High. What Moses was told when he was up there for those 40 days and 40 nights, we have to study and go into. He got the FaceTime. We don't even get the phone call. So, again, this is dealing with sexually transmitted diseases and infections. And what we're going to do now is get the word issue inside the Hebrew, which is H2101. Which actually helps to prove what this chapter is all about. This is why the context within this chapter specifically is dealing with, again, uncleanliness. So chapter 12, not to skip over 13 and 14, but particularly chapter 12 in chapter 15 both deal with the male and female genitalia and our sexual aspects of the law that we're diving into right now. So, all of you see the Hebrew word there, H2101. It is zawab, a masculine noun, which is a seminal or menstrual flux dealing with the woman on her cycle or her flower. An issue means what flows or what comes out of. So it is discharge, semen, discharge, a venereal disease of men and of women, or an issue or a flux of woman. Now the word venereal means something that pertains or deals with sexually transmitted diseases and infections, or a man or a woman's sexual lifestyle. So, of course, the Strong's definition, the seminal or menstrual influx, the issue once again. So let's keep on reading back into Leviticus chapter, start from verse 3 again, and then keep on reading.
Verse 3, and this shall be his uncleanness in his issue, whether his flesh run with his issue, for his flesh be stopped from his issue. It is his uncleanness.
Now we're going to shortly get into this. Sometimes STDs or STIs can cause a blockage of discharge, being urine or fluids in general. So that's what, or his flesh be stopped from his issue in his uncleanness. And not all the time. I'm going to emphasize as well. Just this chapter is specifically outlining the sexual aspects of the law, but not all bacterial infections that come dealing with male and female genitalia are from any kinds of sexuality. Right. You can also build up bacteria. You can get microbes or viruses, things of that nature from physical context. Right. You want to expound on it?
There's also, to add to this point, there's also certain foods you eat. If they're not properly domesticated, they can pick up on viruses, like eating unclean animals, and even the conditions of how cows are treated and what they're fed.
You guys heard him say unclean animals. So, and as well as everything else, but the point in emphasizing what he said, to expound and go further, you can also develop certain infections. You can get, what's it called? You can actually get eczema from not showering or being too much in the process of physical contact and actually going a period of time without cleaning yourself. And bacteria and infections, things that in nature can develop because you're not necessarily cleaning yourself in a certain amount of time, and the bacteria receives and gets time to grow, as opposed to you cleaning yourself in a certain time frame that you are supposed to. Hence, look at it this way: when wrestlers have to wear headgear, if any of you see wrestlers, they have, guys, what's it called? The cauliflower ear, when they have the built up, or you see them both having ears, and watch UFC, Khabib, like his ear, that bacteria buildup when you don't properly clean yourself in a certain amount of time from wrestling. So bacteria can build up anywhere on the body, and issues can arise and develop out of it. So blockage or issue can come either which way. But this chapter specifically is outlining the sexual aspects of the law. So go ahead, Nathan.
Verse 4. Every bed whereon he lieth, that hath the issue, is unclean. And everything whereon he sitteth shall be unclean.
Go ahead.
And whosoever toucheth his bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening.
The God we serve is so set apart. He said, if you sit on the bed, you have to bathe and clean yourself. We serve a God that is not like the false other gods of these nations. He's so set apart and clean. He wants you to bathe yourself, and you're unclean just from sitting on it. Some of you will look at this and realize that, oh, damn, Lord, I just sat on something. The Lord doesn't give a damn. He doesn't care. He said, you're unclean now because, well, now you've done what you weren't supposed to be doing. Now, of course, we're living in modern times today. We're not living back in our homeland, but we try to apply it to the best of our ability. If you have an issue, or if you have an infection or STD, you should get yourself checked and separate yourself accordingly and take measures, not just for yourself, which is the beautiful part about the law, but for your neighbors, so that you don't spread it. That's why he said anything that's touched, anything that's sat there on, you don't spread it. Because bacteria is the number one thing on earth that needs just the right amount of environment to reproduce and grow, and then here it is, you passed everything. And let me take it further. We see just what we see as the Lord created us. The Lord's vision is 10,000 times brighter than the sun. So if you think it's not a big deal that you're not supposed to touch anything, don't touch this, don't touch that, because the law is going to keep continuing, and as we keep our reading this chapter, to emphasize the same thing, you're going to realize the Lord is so set apart that you don't see what he sees. That's why he told you to separate accordingly. And it's for a reason. It's not because he's a bully and you're nasty and no, he said it for a reason. The God we serve is so holy, just, and set apart that you have to understand to the utmost degree that when he told the Levites they had to bathe in water, they had to wash their hands before even making sacrifices, he set apart to that degree and manner that he doesn't even want you touching the sacrifices without your hands being clean. These are the laws of cleanliness that we have and the laws of cleanliness that we have to follow. So go ahead. I believe you finished verse 6 up. Go ahead.
And he that sitteth on anything whereon he sat, that has the issue shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. And he that toucheth the flesh of him that has the issue shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
So this is what's required for the man that comes into contact with the unclean person that has the issue. He bathed himself and then he's unclean until the evening. Go ahead.
Verse 8. And if he that hath the issue spit upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
So the Lord covered this particular aspect because people would be stupid, foolish, petty, angry, silly, in those particular manners and aspects, and not do as they're told. And we're going to get cases and examples as we continue to read, but the point of this is that anything that comes into contact with this person, now you're unclean. And the Lord said spit, so imagine what else you can imagine that goes along with that. Go ahead.
Verse 9. And what saddle soever he rideth upon that have the issue shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth anything that was under him shall be unclean until the evening. And he that beareth any of those things shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
Go ahead.
And whomsoever he toucheth that has the issue and has not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
Go ahead. Finish up to verse 13.
Come. In the vessel of earth that he toucheth, which has the issue, shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water.
The wood has to even be cleaned. The Lord does not play when it comes to separation. If he said to separate, it's for a reason. Go ahead.
And when he that hath an issue is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean.
You notice how the Lord says you have to bathe yourself in water, which means you actually have to get cleaning products and sanitize yourself. He said that because there's a lot of people that don't. I believe the actor's name was Ashton Kutcher that came out and said that he doesn't shower every day.
It was a female too.
Yeah, wasn't it his wife? I don't bring that up for comedic purposes. I bring that up to show you if the Lord had to command you to bathe, he would like for you to be clean. And it's not just for you being clean, it's because every single day the bacteria that grows on your body, the bacteria that cleanses your body, the bad bacteria that can surround you that you could possibly breathe in, pathogens, viruses, things of that nature. It's best to clean yourself, to rid yourself of those things on a daily basis, to just keep yourself clean so that necessarily any other issue that would arise out of you not cleaning yourself, you wouldn't have to worry about. Go ahead, up.
there was a article. It came out a while back. There was an Indian dude in India. He went years without showering. He was famous for that. And after this dude showered, he died. He just.
You see the Oh shoot! Man finally cleaned himself after years of not showering, and then he died from being clean from what? You see the judgments and how much the Lord don't play when it comes to being clean, man. So verse 13, which concludes it, says that he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing and wash his clothes. You have to wash your clothes, not just your body, your clothes too. And bathe his flesh in running water, and he shall be clean. And of course, again, these are sacrificial requirements for when somebody is unclean. And on the 8th day he shall take to him two turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them unto the priest. And the priest shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord for his issue. Now, y'all stop, that's his fact. Apayak, highlight y'all stop comment, Baba Mashab. Let me read it. So he said the laws of the Most High are filled with infinite wisdom. All laws were ahead of so-called science for thousands of years. And guess what? They still are. Come. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to get into sexually transmitted diseases and infections that deal with the issues of uncleanliness. So the first one we're going to pull up is gonorrhea. Again, this particular chapter deals with the sexual aspects of the law. So I made notes for all of you to take down. And again, those of you that are on Clubhouse, I will be reading them. The first one is gonorrhea. And particularly, these particular sexually transmitted diseases deal with the discharge that was mentioned in verses 2 to verse 3, and also dealing with the issue. All right, so that's the picture of what gonorrhea looks like. So that's the visual for it, of course. Now to explain, gonorrhea is an STD, sexually transmitted disease, that can cause an infection in the genitals, the rectum, and the throat. It is a venereal disease involving inflammatory discharge from the urethra or the penis. Again, discharge. According to the CDC, it is estimated that 1.6 million new gonococcal infections occurred in the United States in 2018, and more than half occur among young people aged 15 through 24. It says here are some symptoms for women that have gonorrhea. Listen closely. Painful or burning sensation, increased vaginal discharge, vaginal bleeding between menstrual cycles. Here are some symptoms for men. A burning sensation when urinating, a white, yellow, or green discharge from the penis, painful or swollen testicles. Again, so all of you can understand. Now, the next one we're going to go into is chlamydia. Now, chlamydia is spelled CHLAMYDIA, and then gonorrhea is spelled GONORRHEA. So I'm showing this picture, but allow me to get to it shortly as I explain it. It says chlamydia is a common STD that can cause infection among both men and women. Chlamydia can cause permanent damage to a woman's reproductive system, which can make it difficult and impossible to get pregnant. Listen to this closely. Gay and bisexual men are also at a higher risk of this STD as well. There are 200,000 cases of this disease annually in the United States. These are symptoms for men: a discharge from the penis, a burning sensation when urinating, pain and swelling in the testicles. Now, this is the point of this picture. It says this is symptoms for women, an abnormal vaginal discharge, a burning sensation when urinating, an unusual sore, bleeding between periods. In women, untreated chlamydia can cause pelvic inflammatory disease. This disease can lead to the formation of scar tissue that can block the fallopian tubes from doing what? Transporting eggs. Again, this goes into the blockage that Leviticus 15:3 was talking about. Or his flesh be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanliness. So long-term pelvic and abdominal pain. The last one, the point of this picture, ectopic pregnancy, which is pregnancy that occurs outside the womb. As all of you can see in the picture, the egg is inside the fallopian tube. The egg is not in the uterus, the space where it's being pointed at, right? The pregnancy is outside of the uterus, which means the life of the child is going to grow inside the tube. You know what's going to happen when the baby grows? That tube's going to burst. That is judgment. And it is not normal for a child, nor any child, or an egg to be produced inside the fallopian tube. The eggs are transported through the fallopian tubes, then placed into the uterus. What happened? Can I be heard? Put a con in the chat if so. Making sure we ain't got no sound issues. There are no comments on it from Clubhouse. All right, so that was chlamydia, and that's the close of it. Again, that picture just shows and represents no issues. So again, the picture represents and shows what happens when pregnancy occurs outside the uterus. So now, the next one is epididymis, particularly for men. I pray that none of you get this. So epididymis is the inflammation of the coil tube. Epididymis, bear with me, it's spelled EPIDIDYMITIS. Again, that's epididymis, EPIDIDYMITIS. So it says epididymis, or epididymitis, is the inflammation of the coil tube at the back of the testicle that stores and carries sperm, often caused by bacterial infection or an STI, sexually transmitted infection. Epididymitis is the most common cause of acute pain in adult males. More than 600,000 men are affected yearly in the United States. These are symptoms of epididymitis: a swollen, discolored scrotum, testicle pain and tenderness, pain when you pass urine, discharge from the penis, blood in the semen, pain or discomfort in the lower abdomen or pelvic area. Now, what I'm going to do now is pull up an article on the last portion of this. What's known as ballantitis from myclevelandclinic.org. I'm not going to read all of it, but just pertaining to irritations in male genitalia that occur and happen when bacteria begins to grow in abundance around the particular penile head of the region, and this ends up happening. So again, as all of you have heard from what I read, all of this deals with issues and discharges from the penis as well as the vagina. This happens because of what occurs from unlawful sexual practices. Can you get the door? So what occurs and what happens or let me read this before I expound and continue. So this is ballantitis. Ballantitis is a treatable condition that most commonly happens in uncircumcised males. Uncircumcised. We read earlier that when you circumcise your children, you're at less of a risk from developing any penile problems later on in life. It says the main symptoms of ballantitis include inflammation and pain on the head of the penis. Now, going down, it says, what is ballantitis? Ballantitis is pain and inflammation, swelling and irritation of the glands, the head of the penis, that happens most often in uncircumcised males. Circumcision is a procedure performed to remove the skin, the foreskin, from the head of the penis. Ballantitis is typically caused by a yeast infection. However, it can be due to a bacterial or viral infection. It's not contagious. Now, to close on that with ballantitis, the reason why I read this, and again I emphasize it, Shlomo, is because of the fact that it says it often occurs in uncircumcised males. And because of that, this is why we're supposed to circumcise our children. So again, this adds to the scientific aspect of our laws when the Lord told us to circumcise our children, particularly on the 8th day, and the benefits we reap from it when we listen and do as he says. Now, again, discharge is the release, the freeing of, the exonerate. Particularly in this passage, it is the free flow of fluid once again. So, the sacrificial requirements, of course, once again, for one that has an STD or an issue of his flesh, offer up 2 turtle doves, a young pigeon, and he is to become pure again after being impure from the said issues that he is having, and he's supposed to separate himself from. Now, if the issue occurs and happens for more than the period of 7 days, separate yourself according to the time period accordingly before you're official and clean again and you're healed from the issue of whatever sort it is that you have before mating, before physical contact, physical touch, so that you do not spread what it is that you have. So now that we're finished with the first portion of Leviticus 15, again, verses 1 to verse 13 deal with the issue, sexually transmitted diseases and infections particularly. So now let's get Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 16. So now we're moving on to sexual intercourse. Go ahead.
It's the book of Leviticus chapter 15 verse 16. And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the even. And every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water and be unclean until the even. The woman also with whom man shall lie with, seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the even.
Now, the Lord also had to tell us within the law, you're unclean until even, and this is where sexual intercourse is taking place. You perspirate during sex, you transmit bacteria during sex, and when two are coming together, particularly in this fashion, the mixture of these things and the transmitting of these things, the reason why the Lord said to bathe and clean yourself is to prevent any infections or diseases from arising. So again, Apayak, if you could pull up the notes, I had just made a small short list of, before you get it, can you get H7364 within the concordance, please? Baba Kushab. We need the Hebrew again. And then I'll just share my notes of what I had made pertaining to the do's and don'ts after sexual intercourse. Now, as all of you can see, the word is rakatz, which means to wash off, wash away. But wash off and wash away what? To be washed or to wash oneself. It is to lab, the whole or part of a thing, to bathe self or to wash yourself. But why for this particular purpose and reason? Bacteria, microbes, anything pertaining or related to that. So the reason why it's going into this is because it has to be washed off, or you need to be cleansed, particularly of these things, to prevent infection from arising, to prevent it from spreading. And it says unclean because necessarily you're impure. And of course, for the act of sex that human beings, of course, that the Most High had created us for, be fruitful and be multiplied, you don't need to offer up sacrifice for doing what you were created for. You were made and created to reproduce. That's why you have, as a man, the penis, she has the vagina. It says the seed of the copulation go out from him, meaning when he releases his seed, he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean till evening. So, if you could kindly pull up my notes. I'm about to share them in just a second. The reason why I'm not giving you any of this as if none of you don't know any better, or we're all grown-ass adults and some of you are ignorant, some of you are childish, that's not the case. The reason why I'm giving this is because you guys have watched movies where a couple may have had sex. You know what they do? They lay there and they just talk in bed and then they end up falling asleep. And you know what the movie scene shows the next morning? They get up for breakfast, they just get dressed for work, and that's it. We don't do that here. As Israelites, as God's people, we're set apart. So you can understand, we don't do that. Good sir, if you could blow it up, you know the deal. So, again, Leviticus chapter 15 from verses 16 to 18, the do's and don'ts after sexual intercourse, the Hebrew word rachatz, H7364. Number 1, take a shower, as the scriptures say, to thoroughly cleanse, scrub, and rinse bacteria and perspiration off of the body. Now, again, all of you are adults, but I'm telling you this outside of what the scriptures have already outlined and said, because a lot of people wouldn't think to do so. A lot of people would think, let me just pat myself, wipe myself down, get a rag. No, that's not how it works. Bathe your whole body and clean yourself. Word of Christ. Number 2, urinate to clear the reproductive tract and clear of any excess fluids from intercourse. All of you can actually look this up. All of you have done it yourselves. You should use the bathroom after sexual intercourse to clear out your reproductive tract, to clear any excess fluids from out your system so that bacteria and microbes don't grow over the course after sex from the transmission of fluids. Number 3, you should wear loose clothing, man and woman, to allow the body and organs to breathe. The one thing you have to understand about bacteria, which is number 4, do not take a hot bath, a bubble bath, or whatever else, etc., because a dark, moist environment is conducive and ready for bacteria to grow in. Which is why the Lord said to bathe yourself. Don't sit in water. It actually means get up and shower and rinse and clean yourself all over your body. Not just speaking on behalf of sitting in water. He said to do it because you actually physically scrub off and clean yourself of the transmission of all the fluids that occurred, and from the act of sexual intercourse, you clean yourself. Number 5, which I think is the most important. Do not use wipes, napkins, or towels, or anything else I did not list or put down to clean your whole body. Clean your whole body as the scripture says. These things can prevent risk of infection, foul smell of the genitalia, and skin irritations. Having a proper hygiene routine when you're done. Again, we are not like the heathen. This is why the Lord said we are commanded to be separate, holy, and just as he is. The God we serve is a clean and set apart God. When you think of holy, think of the Lord as not like everybody else, because that's exactly what he is. He's not like everyone else. If he told you to do it, if he told you to separate, he said it ultimately for the reason he said so. So now that that's finished, pertaining to uncleanliness with issues and STDs, things of that nature. That portion of the lesson is now over. Now we're going to go into a woman on her flower or her cycle, or what's known as the menstrual cycle, and or known today as the period. Now let's go to Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 19.
The book of Leviticus, chapter 15, verse 19. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the evening. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
Go ahead.
And whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening.
Go ahead.
And if it be on her bed or anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until the evening.
Now again, this is for the reason and for the purpose that there's a time period when you're supposed to be around people, and there's a time period when you're supposed to separate. The woman being delicately and preciously made as she was, she has what's called a menstrual cycle every single month, roughly from 25 ranging to 35 days. Scientists have claimed this. We're going to read it because those days particularly, or those numbers, are all divisible by 7, which means not only does she get it monthly, it fits beautifully and perfectly when the Lord says she's supposed to be put apart 7 days, and she's supposed to be separate so that her uncleanliness, she does not spread to anyone else, and she's separate from the people in the state of her impurity at this particular time period. Go ahead.
Usually during the time in her uncleanness, which usually revolves around the moon, which controls her cycle, and it's usually around the Sabbath. And this is why the Lord said for the man to separate himself from his woman and focus on him, and then let her deal with her issues. And if you notice, any woman that you interact with, let's say, oh, I'm on a period or whatever it is, right? The world follows a solar calendar. We follow a lunar calendar. Right. So by the lunar calendar, when she mentions these things, you can see that her period is around the Sabbath.
Right.
It always is. What stage is Sabbath? It can be different for each woman. But as we know, when women actually habitate together, their cycles are joined into one Sabbath.
Okay. So it's beautiful that the brother Lloyd had said that, because if you think about it, every 7 days, of course, we have 6 working days, the 7th you rest, but the 7 days, and now he was just expounding on behalf of the fact that a woman's cycle actually ties in monthly with the Sabbath, or happens to fall near it or on it. It's beautiful how that ties in, because the moon changing its face every single 7 days is beautiful within the fact that every 7 days she has her time period alone for the month, and she's supposed to be separate. It's just around the same time that the moon is also changing its phases. So that wisdom the brother gave to Wada. We're now going to get into the scientific aspect of what the period and what menstruation is. So now, surprisingly, one of the best articles I've read that actually break down menstruation is from Planned Parenthood. Surprisingly. I was like, wow, that's nice. The part where it goes off is why they ask, do transgender guys get a period? Come on, bro. We're not gonna read that though. But let's read. So menstruation. Menstruation, aka having your period, is when blood and tissue from your uterus come out of your vagina. It usually happens every month. What's the menstrual cycle? Your menstrual cycle helps your body prepare for pregnancy every month. It also makes you have a period if you're not pregnant. Your menstrual cycle and your period are controlled by hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and here's how it all goes down. You have 2 ovaries. Women, Not males, not transgenders, not non-binaries, or whoever else. Women. You have 2 ovaries, and each one holds a bunch of eggs. The eggs are super tiny, too small to see with the naked eye. During your menstrual cycle, hormones make the eggs in your ovaries mature. When an egg is mature, that means it's ready to be fertilized by a sperm cell. These hormones also make the lining of your uterus thick and spongy. That's beautiful if you think about it, because just in case seed is released and the sperm does meet the egg, the reason why the uterus becomes spongy is to make room for the baby and make room for life, so that she may have, or he may have, an environment to grow in and properly grow accordingly. So if your egg doesn't get fertilized, it has a nice cushy place to land and start a pregnancy. This lining is made of tissue and blood, like almost everything else inside our bodies. It has a lot of nutrients to help a pregnancy grow. About halfway through your menstrual cycle, your hormones tell one of your ovaries to release a mature egg. This is called ovulation. Most people don't feel it when they ovulate, but some ovulation symptoms are bloating, spotting, or a little pain in your lower belly that you may feel on one side. Once the egg leaves your ovary, it travels through one of your fallopian tubes towards your uterus. And pregnancy doesn't happen. Your body doesn't need the thick lining in your uterus. Your lining breaks down, and the blood, nutrients, and tissue flow out of your body through your vagina, aka your period. So if you do get pregnant, your body needs a lining. That's why your period stops the pregnancy. Your period comes back when you're not pregnant anymore. So now to continue. At some point during puberty, blood comes out of your vagina, and that's your first period. Most women get their first period between the ages of 12 and 14. You saw it, right? Get their period. Yeah, I see that, right? Come on, man. Most women get their first period between the ages of 12 and 14, but some women get them earlier or later than that. Now, we live in a society, because of how over and hypersexualized it is, our food is tainted to the max with GMOs and all the most uncleanliness, defiled products you can think of. So some girls are capable of getting their periods at 7, 8, 9. It's possible.
But that's not.
What up?
The thing about it is possible, but it's not normal. Like,
Right.
you're not supposed to be getting a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old. They're not supposed to be getting their period at that young age.
Right.
What you're saying, that my
You just a little louder up?
my daughter, she had a recent doctor's appointment,
Mhm.
and the doctors had said that she's basically on the verge, like, if her diet, and we eat really good, but if she continues to eat the way she's eating, which is, it just tells you, it shows you that even when you're eating good, the food's still tainted.
Right.
So basically, she could be getting her period. You know what I'm saying? And they're saying she couldn't say directly to her mother, like, yo, through exercising and dieting, she gonna be okay. She had to, like, in a roundabout way, say, through exercising and dieting, you can prolong your daughter not having her period for some years. You know what I'm saying? So everything that we teach as far as dieting and exercising, like, people be thinking it's because we be trying to be militant, which we are, but it's really for your own good. Whether you're older, there's people trying to make those excuses, I'm 60, I'm 50, I got this, I got that. Nah. Whether you're older or whether you're younger, your children, they can be active. When you're older, you can go for walks. Everything is to really give you a fighting chance to survive in this society. So what Barak is saying is 100% spot on, but I just had to make that point. Like, no little girl's supposed to be thinking about that. That's showing that her body's ready to do what?
And may you have sex.
Right, to have kids. At 7, you're a damn kid. At 18, you're a kid. Shit. That's all I want to say, man.
Oh, God. So, and continuing, okay, so between the ages of 12 and 14, but some women get them earlier or later than that. There's no way to know exactly when you'll get it, but you may feel some PMS symptoms a few days before it happens. If you don't get your period by the time you're 16, it's a good idea to visit a doctor or a nurse. And I'll stop there with this article particularly. I'm just wanting to emphasize what the period is and go over its importance from a scientific manner so that brothers understand it's more than just the bleeding and blood's coming out the vagina, women use tampons to hold in, take the blood, pads, or whatever that it is they're comfortable using. So this next article from the clevelandclinic.org also expounds more further into depth of the menstrual cycle. And again, from verse 19, saying she shall be put apart 7 days, is actually, well, what this article does is to help prove that, so that we can actually see that the divisibles of 7 are still followed even accordingly to the woman's cycle. So it starts from saying menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle begins when you get your period or you menstruate. This is when you shed the lining of your uterus. The cycle is part of your reproductive system and prepares your body for a possible pregnancy. A typical cycle lasts between 24 and 38 days. Menstruation is the monthly shedding of the lining of your uterus. Menstruation is also by the terms menses, menstrual period, menstrual cycle, or period. Menstrual blood, which is partly blood and partly tissue from the side of your uterus, the women, flows from your uterus through your cervix and out of your body through your vagina. Menstruation is driven by hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers in your body. Your pituitary gland in your brain and your ovaries, part of your reproductive system, make and release certain hormones at a certain time during your menstrual cycle. These hormones cause the lining of your uterus to thicken. This happens so that if a pregnancy would occur, an egg can implant into your uterine lining. Hormones also cause your ovaries to release an egg, known as ovulation. The egg moves down your fallopian tubes where it waits for a sperm. If a sperm doesn't fertilize that egg, pregnancy doesn't occur. The lining of your uterus breaks down and sheds. This is your period. The menstrual cycle is a term to describe a sequence of events that occur in your body as it prepares for the possibility of pregnancy every month. Your menstrual cycle is the time from the first day of your menstrual period until the first day of your next menstrual period. Every person's cycle is slightly different, but the process is the same. Now, I'll conclude it here. I knew sisters were going to comment. Makayat said they do. And then she also said, could you highlight Makayat? She said, what makes it worse is the growth hormones given to the animals we eat to grow quicker and bigger. This is why I emphasize that women can also, young girls, because women are, you would refer to as older, younger girls are capable of getting their period way by the time of elementary school, maybe 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, early middle school, and then you have to deal with the problems accordingly as such, because then a period would signify that she being a young woman, ovulation in the process comes in afterwards, which deals with the period and the menstrual cycle, just in case the girl that's pregnant decides to end up having a baby. So, what?
The hormones the sister's speaking on is called progesterone, testosterone, and there's one more that they predominantly put in food and animal products. That one.
So to continue with the article, right?
Estradiol.
Estradiol?
Estradiol.
Estrogen?
Estradiol, so mimicry like that, yeah.
So to continue in the article, it says, how long is a normal menstrual cycle? Pay attention to this. It says the average length of a menstrual cycle is 28 days. However, a cycle can range in length from 21 days to about 35 days and still be normal. The days between periods is your menstrual cycle length. The average menstrual cycle lasts 28 days. Average month is about 28 days. However, cycles lasting as little as 21 days or as long as 35 days can be normal. Now, what's beautiful about 21, 28, and 35? They're all divisible by 7. The Lord says she's supposed to be put apart for how many days? 7 days. So, matter of fact, we're going to keep reading this before we give the physicals for it. It says, how long does a normal period last? Most people have their period bleed for between 3 and 7 days. Is a 3-day period normal? A period, if normal, if it's anywhere between 3 and 7 days. While on the shorter end of the range, some people have a menstrual period for 3 days. Now I'm going to expound and say something. just because it's heavy bleeding for 3 days and they're spotting maybe for the 4th and it may be none on the 5th, does not license you to sleep with your woman.
Come on.
If it said 7 days, it's 7 days. You give the completion of time. You give the completion of time before laying with your woman again.
Right.
Because some people will look at that. They'll ask, you're not bleeding no more? No, that's not how it works. If you said 7 days, the Lord said 7 days.
You know what that's showing?
What?
Hypersexuality
Thank you.
and the lack of self-control.
Oh my Lord.
I don't want to take away from what Barak is expounding
Oh,
on.
that's
That
perfect.
shows the flaw within you, the lack of self-control.
Lord
Because
Christ.
the more you hold your abstinence during that time period, it increases and secretes testosterone, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins.
Come on.
You have to know the balance between the Lord's laws and understand why He puts her away. And as those 7 days, she recycles and cycles and restores her natural nature of femininity. Your testosterone is restored, especially when you're absent.
Okay.
Go ahead, bro.
I'm grateful he said that because that's exactly what verse 24 is for in Leviticus chapter 15 that we're going to read after we're done here. But the reason I wanted to emphasize it is because, yes, the Lord gave a time period from when you're away from your woman to the brothers and to those listening that are listening in that are not of rum. It is not going to kill you to not lay with the woman for 7 days.
It's not. It's really not.
Yo.
It's not.
You're not going to die or have a heart attack because you can't lay with a woman for 7 days. Because when you were 15, 16, 18, and you weren't having sex or before you were a virgin, you weren't thinking about not laying with a woman. And it didn't kill you not having sex for more than 7 days. So when you're with a woman and you have to separate from her according to the law, it's not going to kill you to not lay with your woman for 7 days. And as Yeshaya just said, and I'm grateful he said it, that's what verse 24 is for. So let me close out on this because I'm going to show the physical chart of the phases of the menstrual cycle. Apaya, can you go down to what are the symptoms of getting your period? So it says some women experience symptoms of menstruation and some other women don't. The intensity of these symptoms can also vary. The most common symptom is cramps.
That shit that I say some people.
Y'all have to read between the lines, man. The cramping a woman feels in the pelvic area is your uterus contracting to release its lining. Other signs of you getting your period are, this is why the Lord said to separate, because every single man does not want to deal with these things. Mood changes, trouble sleeping, headache, food craving, bloating, breast tenderness, and acne. So it gives her time to focus on what she's going through currently at the particular moment. And guess what it does for you as a man? One, you won't be stressed the hell out because you won't have to deal with it. And on top of that, you won't have to deal with these particular issues and argue and fight much more with your woman because it's her time of the month. Now, I will say, we're not inside of our homeland where we can practice this to the best of our ability. But what you shouldn't be doing, you shouldn't be sleeping in the same vicinity or space. You shouldn't be sleeping in the same bed.
Right.
And you should try to remain as separate as possible. I'm not saying throw your woman or your rib out in the wilderness. You can't do that.
Don't be weird, please, yo.
Separate room. Separate room.
We have to apply the spirit of the law because we can't follow it to the letter. So separate accordingly. You can keep your ride in your pants for 7 days. It's not hard. And on top of that, separate as best as you possibly can to keep the law to the best of your ability. So that closes out on this particular portion of verse 19 and verse 23 with the woman on her period. What Yeshaya had just mentioned, and I'm grateful he did, because the Lord had to cover this inside this chapter, is verse 24. We're still inside Leviticus chapter 15. Let's read verse 24.
Leviticus chapter 15, verse 24. And if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed whereon he lieth shall be unclean.
Let me explain to all of you something. When I was first researching this, my eyeballs were on fire. You want to know why? I'm not going to have AHLAHAYANAWA do it just so I can give you guys grace. So I don't go through what I went through. When you type in why you shouldn't lay with the woman on her period, everything that comes up tells you how to practice safe sex with the woman when she's on her period. Everything. Everything. The worst thing I had to read is that blood is a good lubrication.
Yo.
I had to read it. I have to listen. Verse 24 is the most disgusting part of this entire thing. I have to go into it. Let me. I'm trying to keep it professional as best as I can. Let me help you all understand. Please don't search it up because I don't want any of you to go through what I went through. Matter of fact, before, when I was searching up, all of you know, when you type something in the bar, you know how something, the head kind of comes up to give you a suggestion? Yep. You know, someone actually searched up what his period blood tastes like? You get why the Lord said to separate? There's just certain things you don't do.
I mean, that just goes into, a lot of you guys may have social media in your feed. You'll see a lot of unwanted feed, when you explore, So a lot of what he was researching, he was trying to look at the benefits to his lesson and found almost the complete opposite, don't it? And these are just the things that we have to, avoid, block, mute certain words, filter our searches because of the monstrosity of what people actually look at and they're curious about. So,
just so you guys got to say, I did all of that for this lesson, but I had to suffer because of the things I had to read. You know what the sad part is? Because of how nasty and disgusting this is. You know what people do today? Lay the towel down, we'll be fine. You think doing that, or people talking about it, or we do it in the shower, we're absolutely. I had to read this. I'm just like, there's no knowledge in wickedness. Just why?
Why would you want blood? Even my coworkers said it tastes like iron.
Let's stay focused.
Yeah, let's stay focused. The point is, let me give this, right? So, all of you have eaten out at restaurants. Now, hear this. I realized something. If any of you have ordered steak, all of you ordered, or you're supposed to order it, well done, or extremely well done, because you have to emphasize it sometimes. They like to leave blood, there's a little bit of blood inside the steak. Do you know what it says about eating uncooked meat? It gives you a warning. It tells you you're at risk for foodborne illnesses if you eat raw meat or uncooked meat that still has blood inside it. If it says that about cooked food, why, when it comes to laying with a woman on that time of the month, would it be any different? Let's get into it. Oh, before we get into it, we need to see wisdom that was applied and used up in the scriptures. Let's get Ecclesiastes 3:1.
This is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven.
There's a season and a time to everything under the heaven. Skip down to verse 5.
Verse 5. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing.
There's a time period for everything. If you have to separate, give her time to separate. Because if you're married and for however long, you have to follow and keep these laws. And we're living in captivity now, so to emphasize to the best of our ability. Let's get Sirach chapter 42 and verse 23. Sirach chapter 42 and verse 23.
It's the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 42, verse 23. All these things live and remain forever for all usage.
He made her so that the vagina, in the process of during the menstrual cycle, here's the deeper wisdom of it. So let's put aside what we had just spoken about. The vagina cleans itself for those 7 days. Did you know that when you lay with your woman in the process of copulation and seed being released, bacteria builds up? Guess what the blood from the vagina is doing? It's cleansing it and pushing it out. So if it's disgusting that you're laying with your woman on her period, you're digging in unto her when the vagina is cleaning itself and removing all the garbage. That's the wisdom in keeping this commandment. If you separate accordingly and you don't lay with her as the Lord had commanded you not to do, you allow for her to clean herself. But you're all the more selfish when you're laying with her when you're not supposed to be. And as Yeshaya perfectly said, when you're hypersexual and you can't control your sexual appetite, we're going to read about the consequences that there are if you choose to lay with your woman when she's on her cycle. And it's that time of the month. Go ahead.
All these things live and remain forever for all uses. And they are all obedient.
Go ahead.
All things are double one against another.
Read that again.
All things are double one against another.
Go ahead.
And he hath made nothing imperfect.
So, if you can understand, right? If everything is double and we're both opposites, we're supposed to work together. The only way that this can work is by keeping the Most High's laws. Man and woman. So again, for following these laws and separating the process of cleanliness when a woman is on her menstrual cycle, this is why these laws are put in place. Apaya, can you upload the picture of the menstrual cycle and the process that occurs? That way we can give a visual to allow everyone to see what actually happens and what occurs. And again, the wisdom from Ecclesiastes 3:1 is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to refrain from embracing. Now, of course, all of you see the menstrual cycle at the top, ovulation. You see the luteal phase, follicular phase. Let's start from the bottom, which is the menstruation. Menstruation, this is the quote-unquote period when the endometrium or the lining of the uterus sheds over 3 to 7 days if there is no pregnancy. Excuse me, that's the first stage. Then you have the follicular stage. This is when several eggs mature inside small cysts or follicles, which then occurs and goes into the process of ovulation. This is when the egg is released from the biggest follicle and travels through the fallopian tube, where it can be fertilized. If not fertilized, it dissolves in about 24 to 48 hours. The next process, the luteal phase, this is when the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, is thick and prepared to support a pregnancy or be released in a period. And then goes back to menstruation once again, which starts the cycle all over, which occurs again from 21, 28, and 35 days. So now again, this is how the menstruation, or i.e. the period cycle works, and this is what occurs and this is what happens. So now we're going to read scriptures for evidence that help us to understand and know what occurs and what happens when a woman is on her cycle at that time of the month, and the mindset that they had and what they understood according to this knowledge. So let's get the book of Genesis chapter 31 and 34.
This is the book of Genesis, chapter 31, verse 34. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not.
Go ahead.
And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of woman is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images.
So she told him not to come near her because it was her time of the month. She had her flower, i.e. her period. Her menstruation was occurring at that particular time. So let's go to the book of 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verse 2.
This is the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 11, verse 2. And it came to pass in the evening time that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. And the woman was very beautiful to look upon.
Go ahead.
And David sent and inquired after the woman. And one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?
You did not hear that. Go ahead.
And David sent messengers and took her. And she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness. And she returned unto her house.
So what's important for you all to understand, even though this was adultery and this was wicked with what he did, he waited 7 days to lay with this woman. After she was purified and after her menstruation cycle was finished, he laid with her. Yes, it was adultery, but the point of it is he still followed and kept the law of uncleanliness by not laying with her while she was on her cycle. So clearly from the scriptures, we can see that this law was clearly followed and should be followed. So with that being said, we're actually going to get Leviticus chapter 20 and 18. Just in case anybody thinks that this abominable and disgusting thing is justifiable and lay down the towel and do whatever else, they think it's okay. Let's read what the Lord said.
This is the book of Leviticus, chapter 20, verse 18. And if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness.
Let me help you understand something about the wisdom of the law. If a woman's separate and she's out of the camp and she's not among the congregation of people, you know a man would actually have to travel and go out of his way to lie down with her? Which means you're sexually deviant enough to go out of your way because you can't control your sexual appetite to lay with your woman while it's that time of the month for her. And you can't help yourself for the need and purpose of sex, that you actually have to go out of your way when she's unclean during this time of the month and go lay with her when she's outside the camp. Someone had to do that, and the Lord gave this for her. Go ahead.
And shall uncover her nakedness.
Her sickness is her period. Go ahead.
He have discovered her fountain.
He wasn't supposed to. Go ahead.
And she had uncovered the fountain of her blood. And both of them shall be cut off from among their people.
The Lord don't play no damn games, man. Now, cut off suggests it means severe action is taken, with death being the ultimate penalty. But being cut off also means one posterity can be cut off and not continue, or you can be made childless. Why was it so severe? Because we're a patriarchal society. So if a man couldn't have kids, it was a shame on him. So before we get into some scriptural context, Apaya, can you pull up the first article on the abstinence of sex on your menstrual cycle? These are studies that aren't emphasized and talked about enough. This is from journals.lww.com. This is sexual intercourse during menstruation and self-reported sexually transmitted disease history among women. It says the purpose of the study was to examine the practice of sexual intercourse during menstruation and the relationship of this practice to the experience of sexual transmitted diseases among women in the United States. So the results, I'm not going to read the results. I'll read the conclusions. The conclusion says that sexual intercourse during menstruation may emerge more consistently as a risk factor for the heterosexual transmission of HIV or other sexually transmitted pathogens in future studies. If future epidemiologic, epidemiologic studies continue to bolster this finding, then public health efforts should promote abstinence during the female menstrual period and target those groups of women among whom this practice is prevalent. Says the likelihood of infection with sexually transmitted diseases is affected by behavioral risk factors and risk markers. Multiple dimensions of sexual behavior, such as age at first intercourse, the number of lifetime sex partners, partner recruitment patterns, frequency and timing of sexual intercourse, and the prevalence of certain sexual practices, and prophylactic and hygiene practices, including vaginal douching, tampon use, and contraception influence the risk for STD and their aftermath. Now, why do I read this? Because when you're not practicing to do the right things, or you're not seeking counsel, and you feel like you can just fornicate and lay with anybody, the Lord has something in store. This is why Ecclesiastes 8:11 says that the heart of the sons of men are fully set in them to do evil. And they don't think that anything is going to happen behind their consequences, behind their actions, and there's not consequences for it. Here's the thing about that, right? The Lord has already sentenced you. You're just catching up to your sentence. So when you think that you're getting away with something, you're really not. So to continue, it says the risk of upper tract infection in women appears to be influenced by the menstrual cycle. Evidence from clinical studies suggests that symptomatic gonococcal or chlamydial pelvic inflammatory disease occurs most frequently during the first week of the menstrual cycle. One reason for the increased risk of infection appears to be relative penetrability of the cervical mucus during menses, the period. Another reason is the reflux of potentially contaminated blood into the fallopian tubes during menstrual uterine contractions. For gonococcal infection, two other factors may be responsible. Iron, which is abundant in menstrual blood, may promote gonococcal growth from gonorrhea. And types of gonococcus that causes tubal infections may proliferate at the cervix during menstruation. Now, disclaimer, this is not to say that period blood contains STDs. This is saying you're at a higher risk of developing STDs or STIs from laying with another man on your time of the month. And here's why: because the mixture of bacteria, the mixture of fluids, and when the man releases his seed, could you imagine how much more unclean you become when you lay with a woman on her cycle? If you're already unclean after having sexual intercourse, how much more unclean are you when you have sex with the woman on her period? And I'm not emphasizing this to push you on discuss. Listen to this for educational and intellectual purposes. There's reasons why you're not supposed to be doing this. The judgments that the Lord set at hand is your posterity being cut off. You can be childless. Your reputation will be destroyed. And he said from the scripture, you shall be cut off from among their people. Get Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 7.
This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 45 and verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil.
Lord.
I, YHWH, do all these things.
So, the Lord, when he says this, creates judgments and consequences for actions, our actions. So when we do what we're not told that we do what we're not supposed to, you don't get away with it. Your sentence, you catch up to your sentence of whatever it is that was meted out to you by the Most High. Let's see. I have another article from health.com. Abaya, can you pull it up? This is from health.com, and then we'll conclude on this. It says, can you get an STI during your period? I'm not going to read the first portion, so Abaya, please just quickly move by it so no one reads it. And start it, however, I'm not going to read it. So, see, Quran put the perfect, highlight his comment, please. It says, Psalms 119 and 144, the righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. Give me understanding and I shall live. Everything I'm reading is the understanding behind the laws that we were given. So with this understanding, we will live if we keep the testimonies, the commandments, the laws, and the statutes we were given. Go on, Tawada. So again, from, you have a precept?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's what you're talking about. This is Tobit, chapter 12, verse 10. But they that sin are enemies to their own life. So to add on to what Barak's talking about concerning women on their menstrual cycles, you become your worst enemy if you don't have self-discipline over your sexual desires, especially wanting to lay with a woman in the timely month where she's actually cleaning out her system. I just wanted to bring that up.
So, water for that. So, I just said it to you. So, again, the reason for this and why we would need to receive the education on this, we have a sexual part and aspect of the law that was given to us as the Lord's people. We need to go into it because we can dive into every single other one. We know the first 10, things of that nature, but we also need to get on behalf of the fact that there's more to the law than what we actually know. And the wisdom and the profoundness of the knowledge that the Lord gave unto Moses, this is what it is tonight. So that we can all understand now what he was given, that he understood, that we are now coming back into the understanding of it now. So, Abayaki should have received it. I sent it. Sure, you can pull it up. So this is just a second article before we close on the last portion of the lesson about the menstrual cycle. And again, Leviticus 15. From Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 19 to verse 24 is all on the menstrual cycle. The next portion of the chapter, which we will be dealing with after this article, from verse 26 to verse 30, deals with the menstrual cycle again, but what happens if it's over 7 days. So the brother has the article, the water. I'll be starting at, however, because I'm not going to read the first sentence. But it says, however, having sex during your period can also raise the chance for sexually transmitted infections or STIs. It's possible to not only get pregnant during your period, which is something that shouldn't be happening because it's not the time for it, but also to contact an STI, since Sherry A. Rose, a woman's health expert and author of Sheology, the definitive guide to women's intimate health, period. Furthermore, women in particular are greatly affected by STIs. More than 9 million women get infected with an STI annually and have more issues from them than men do, according to the Office on Women's Health. So, what are STIs and how do they spread? All of you, please don't read the last paragraph so your eyeballs don't burn. An STI occurs when the foreign agents like bacteria or viruses enter the body through sexual contact and can cause an infection. People can pass it to others through contact with the skin, genitals, mouth, rectum, or body fluids. This includes contact through vaginal sex, anal sex, or oral sex, according to the American College of obstetricians and gynecologists. So, skipping down to the paragraph, what can increase your risk of getting an STI on your period? Let's see. It says on a non-period day, your vagina, the woman's vagina, naturally has a protective acidic pH, which helps prevent the transmission of certain STIs. Said Mary L. Rosser, a gynecologist at Columbia University in New York City, the woman typically can have a vaginal pH between 3.8 to 5.0. But when you're menstruating, the vagina becomes less acidic and more alkaline. Take note of that. It becomes more alkaline because it's cleaning itself. So if you go back to Genesis, when the Lord said that he made Eve a helpmate for Adam, you see how deeper the wisdom gets? He made her delicately and specially for you the way he did to help you and for the benefit of you, that you may live. When you follow simply what the law says. You see how simple that is? And it says, making it easier for microbes to survive and thrive in your reproductive tract, according to research published in 2001 in Diagnostics. Also during your period, your cervix opens slightly to allow blood to pass from the uterus. When this happens, bacteria and viruses can travel into the upper cervix and uterine cavity. So if a man penetrates a woman at this particular time of the month, and the urethra being an open hole that the man has within the penis, you can understand that those bacteria and microbes and or viruses, if bacteria gets inside of her vagina during this period of time, how detrimental it is to a man's health if he lays with her when he's not supposed to. That's why infections increase at this time because of the, again, pathogens, microbes, bacteria that's inside the vagina at this time that's being pushed and cleansed out. None of you would dig inside the garbage can when it's being taken out, right? Because you're not garbage. So you shouldn't be laying with the woman on her cycle at her time of the month if the vagina is cleaning itself and taking that time to eradicate everything it doesn't need because she's not getting pregnant at that particular time frame. So now with that being said, that concludes this. So now what we'll do is finish off this chapter. Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 25. We just concluded verses 19 and 24, the menstrual cycle. We're finishing and closing out the lesson with the menstrual cycle, but what happens if it's extended past 7 days? Go ahead.
This is the book of Leviticus, chapter 15, verse 25. And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean.
Now, I'm going to speak to the men first. If it's more than 7 days that she doesn't have her period, again, you're not going to die because you cannot have sex with the woman. I promise. You're not going to die. What it helps you to do is practice your sexual appetite and abstinence as a man so that you don't allow your sexual members to have control over your mind, which then lead to further and more sexually deviant behaviors, such as pornography and fornicating. Go ahead. That too. Oh, and by the way, disclaimer. The other forms of sex are excluded as well. If she's separate, you can't lay with her at all, which would include oral and anal sex. And I only mention that because someone is going to say, well, I can do it that way. No, you can't. If she's separate, and you cannot touch her or come near unto her. Someone's going to tell you that, and that's the comment to them. If she's separate, you cannot touch her or lay with her in any form, fashion, or manner. Ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Keep reading the thumb.
Verse 26. Every bed whereon she lieth all the days of her issue shall be unto her as the bed of her separation. And whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean, as the uncleanness of her separation.
What?
And whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening.
What?
But if she be cleansed, of her issue, Then she shall number to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take unto her two turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, and bring them unto the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her before Yahweh for the issue of her uncleanness.
Now, before we close this out, there's actually an example of this in the scriptures. Let's go to the book of Mark chapter 5 and verse 25. Again, this last portion of the chapter is dealing with the menstrual cycle that's extended past 7 days. And again, sacrifice has to be made. It's not that she sinned. You can't be a sinner just because you have an extended menstrual cycle. It's just referring and talking about the state of impurity that she's in. And it's only just simply referring to the fact that she needs to be made clean, pure, and whole again. And we're going to read an example of how a priest did so. Go ahead.
This is the book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 25. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years.
How long?
12 years.
Interesting. Go ahead.
And has suffered many things of many physicians.
Wow. Go ahead.
And spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. When she had heard of YHWH, came in the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole.
You know, we just read according to the law, you're supposed to go to the priest for an atonement, right? It's deep, man. YHWH is on a different level. Go ahead. Lloyd, I know you got it. Go ahead.
Verse 28. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And YHWH, immediately knowing him in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes?
So, let me break this down. According to the law, back in Leviticus 15, it says you're supposed to offer up 2 turtles or young pigeons and bring them unto the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, the one for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her before Yahweh for the issue of her uncleanness. Now, why did she look at YHWH and say, if I touch him, I will become whole? Anybody in the chat can answer? Anybody got a precept? Chapter and verse. Let's get Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 1. She understood and looked at YHWH for a reason. Brother Kawan gave one of the good answers, faith. But the answer is in this precept. Go ahead.
This is the book of Hebrews, chapter 3, verse 1. Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest.
Who?
High priest.
Go ahead.
Of our profession, Mashiach YHWH.
She understood one thing. If I touch him, I may become whole. A high priest or a priest does what? Offers up your sacrifice, your atonement. Apostle is what? Sent out. She understood he was sent out and understood his fame and his glory. That hits all 3 ways. He is high priest. He is our sacrifice, and he is our atonement. Why do you think when she touched him, she became whole? In the spirit, she still kept the law and understood these things. Man, that is beautiful. So now, of course, all science does once again is prove what we're reading. So we're going to read about what happens when a woman has an irregular cycle. So irregular periods. This is from clevelandclinic.org. That's a good brother. AHLAHAYANAWA pulls it up. So it says menstrual periods typically last 4 to 7 days and occur roughly every 28 days. Examples of irregular periods include periods that occur fewer than 21 days or more than 35 days apart, missing 3 or more periods in a row, and menstrual flow that's much heavier or lighter than usual. For the men, I'll speak first to them. If your woman is on an irregular cycle, do not lay with her. Because blood can be instant at any given moment. Give it time for separation accordingly. Let her be diagnosed and checked out, and move accordingly with discretion. Now it says, what are irregular periods? Most women and people, most women and girls, Lord, have menstrual periods that last 4 to 7 days. The woman's period usually occurs every 28 days, but normal menstrual cycles can range from 21 days to 35 days. In fact, the average cycle length is 29 days. Many things cause irregular periods or irregular menstruation, such as changes in hormone levels that the sister Makaya had mentioned earlier, because of the foods that are tainted of what we have to unfortunately eat now. Stress, certain health conditions, medications, and more. Now, these are examples of irregular periods. Periods that occur fewer than 21 days or more than 35 days apart, missing 3 or more periods in a row, menstrual flow bleeding that's much heavier or lighter than usual, periods that last longer than 7 days, periods that are accompanied by severe pain, cramping, nausea, or vomiting, bleeding or spotting that happens between periods after menopause or after sexual intercourse, which is why I said if it's irregular, separate and give it time, because it can be instant at any given moment. Now, I don't want to read everything, but I did want to read this. I skip down to lifestyle factors in irregular periods. It says disruptions or changes in your daily routine can have an impact on your menstrual cycle. Some examples of lifestyle factors include stress, gaining or losing a significant amount of weight, exercise routines that result in very low body fat, which are long distance runners. It can be dancers or gymnasts, viruses or other illnesses. Now, when it comes to exercise, it's something regularly that everybody should be doing. That's not only why we have the academy. The brother Shamak had spoken earlier and said that it's a part of our daily life and should be a part of our daily lives. None of you should question why you should take care of yourselves. We're all human here. So with that particularly being said, it's important, right, that in understanding all of this, this is why this particular aspect of the law I highlighted today. Because it's for our own good and it's for our own knowledge that we know how to take care of ourselves. That's why, as we always say, the oldie but goodie in Hosea 4:6 we're destroyed for lack of knowledge. And understanding the law, statutes, and commandments, we can understand again what we have lost. And then it talks about stress. We know that stress is the number one killer, or shall I say silent killer, of us as an Israelite nation. We're the number one for heart disease, which stress is the biggest part of. We're number one for every single ailment that you can think of. But again, understanding this law and understanding how depth and how profound it is and how much more deeper it goes than what we read, it's important that in this enlightenment, we come back to what was once ours and begin to keep it again to the best of our ability. Now, I'll read off other causes of abnormal menstruation. Certain medications, complications of pregnancy or breastfeeding, may also cause your period to be irregular. Other causes include birth control pills. Most birth control pills contain a combination of hormones. The pills prevent pregnancy by keeping your ovaries from releasing eggs. Going on or off birth control pills can affect your menstruation. You may have irregular or missed periods for up to 6 months after discontinuing birth control pills. Natural birth control is learning water cycles. You don't need pills to stop and regularly put in place what the Most High had already set forth pertaining to the creation he made of a woman. Medications such as steroids or anticoagulant drugs or blood thinners. Miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy, again, we went over that earlier. The fertilized egg implants outside the uterus. Surgery, the doctor or physician messing up. Scarring or blockages in your uterus, ovaries, or fallopian tubes. Now, what I did do, Apayak, if you could pull up this last article, is the 10 best PMS supplements that help with heavy periods and also irregular. Again, these are the 10 best PMS supplements to help with heavy periods. You sisters in the comments, I know that there will be comments on what particularly helps. Not that men need to know specifically, but for the fact that women and sisters should share the information with one another to help each other out. You have those of you that are mothers, be informed, be aware, because if you have daughters, you will have to teach them this at some point, even fathers as well. There are certain things as men that we have to confront, regardless of our emotions. I like that up. So the brother Yahweh put the red maca is phenomenal for sisters. Every sister should take red maca root daily, which also helps to promote good sexual reproductive health for women and fertility as well. So in reading this article, it says the average menstrual cycle ranges from 28 to 38 days. It varies from woman to woman, but it should remain the same for each specific woman. If any woman faces some irregular pattern of her menstrual cycle, she should consult with doctors because it may be a sign of premenstrual syndrome, meaning she'll get her menstrual cycle or her period. If your periods keep coming on too early or too late for some consecutive months, you need to consult with your family doctor and try some suggested period supplements to make them regular. If you are facing a heavy, irregular, or prolonged period, it is called menorrhagia that should be treated with proper diet, supplements, or vitamins for period regulation. PMS supplements are as necessary and beneficial as other supplements, like supplements for diabetes or other best supplements for fitness. So, I'm just going to read off the list. The first one is chasteberry. A detailed study has shown that chasteberry should be included in the most popular vitamins for period regulations because it has been found beneficial for female reproductive health, and it may prove some benefits, there it is right there, and it may prove some benefits for regularizing the periods as well. If you are having heavy periods due to some hormonal changes during pregnancy, chasteberry may provide some relief. Always talk to your family doctor before trying it. Calcium. Calcium may continuously change throughout the complete menstrual cycle. In 2017, a clinical trial has verified that calcium supplements may reduce the symptoms of PMS and other irregularities in periods like heavy periods and prolonged periods. Fortunately, calcium can be taken with the help of calcium-enriched foods along with the proper diet. However, calcium supplements can also be taken after a doctor's consultation. Vitamin D, one of the most important vitamins that any man or woman can take. Vitamin D is a very helpful supplement. Of course, all of you see the fish, cheese, mushrooms there. Clean fish, by the way. Vitamin D is also a very helpful supplement that helps you absorb more calcium, so they both work hand in hand. By boosting an immune system and strengthening bones, it alleviates some PMS symptoms. Its anti-inflammatory properties help you alleviate back pain, stress, and anxiety during PMS. Vitamin B6. Of course, you see peppers, you see eggs. I believe that's granola, if I'm not mistaken. It says if you are dealing with PMS and you are facing various mood swings, too, during these heavy period symptoms, you probably need some vitamin B6 supplements to boost your neurotransmitters so you may cope with other psychological symptoms associated with PMS or heavy periods. Vitamin B12. If you're facing heavy periods, you may be on the verge of anemia, which is low blood. Vitamin B12 is very helpful during periods because it helps stimulate your body to produce new blood cells and helps you recover faster after a heavy period. Of course, the pictures are showing all the foods that contain these things. Again, there you have fish. I believe that's liver, that's cheese. See sources of dairy, not the shrimp, unclean. See the granola in the corner. I believe there's sardines in the can. That is a clean fish. See mushrooms. Next one is magnesium. One of the most, again, important things that anybody can take pertaining to supplements. Several PMS symptoms may be caused by the deficiency of magnesium. Women should manage their magnesium levels with the help of magnesium-enriched foods like almonds, green vegetables, and peanuts. A study has verified that magnesium supplements along with vitamin B6 has helped women to ease the severity of PMS. Fatty acids. Now, so you see there, salmon is at one of the top, and avocados as well. You see walnuts. What you say? So to read, it says essential fatty acids are most recommended to deal with the PMS syndrome because they have many anti-inflammatory properties and may prove to be highly beneficial to ease the PMS symptoms. Go to your doctor and consult about how much essential fatty acids are needed for your specific case. Ginkgo biloba. Low-key powerful supplement. Ginkgo biloba is a famous herbal remedy that is among the suggested supplements for heavy periods. It is a wonderful supplement that may help reduce both the physical and psychological symptoms related to PMS. Female ginseng. Female ginseng may be helpful if you are facing premenstrual cramps or pain due to any PMS symptoms like heavy periods or prolonged periods. Do not consume it during pregnancy or breastfeeding. Panah. The last one, actually one of the most important ones, zinc. Foods high in zinc is salmon, not shrimps, it's unclean, beef, and yellow cheese. Zinc should not be ignored while considering any vitamins or supplements for heavy periods. Zinc helps you reduce inflammation and boost your immunity during heavy periods or PMS. It also balances your mood. Women have mood swings at that time of the month and alleviate stress during heavy periods. All 10 of these supplements help one way or another to cope with PMS symptoms, especially heavy periods. It depends on each individual that what specific supplement would be more helpful alleviating PMS symptoms. Furthermore, some specific supplements should be avoided for some specific situations like pregnancy or breastfeeding. Always consult with your family doctor or visit the best pharmacy, this is the Maryland, to consult on what specific PMS supplement should be chosen. I'm going to say. Brother Kanawak said prenatal are increased in most of those vitamins and minerals. Probiotics help as well.
And digestive enzymes.
Okay. Want to say anything before we read close out with precepts?
Just at all, the appreciation of the information being given out. Just a brighter light, broaden the lens of how we're knitted amongst one another. When I created the hormonal therapy class, and I was talking about the foods you would eat, all of these and the pictorial images I was displaying on the PowerPoint, all of these align with going through and helping the menstruational period of women, and as well as the bodily systems of helping both men and women. So I'm just appreciating the knitted message.
Okay. So let's get the book of Psalms, chapter 111 and verse 10.
This is the book of Psalms, chapter 111, verse 10. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all they that do his commandments.
What kind of understanding do they have?
A good understanding have all they that do his commandments.
What?
His praise endures forever.
So a good understanding have all they that do his commandments. We should be doing and keeping these commandments so that we receive the understanding as to why we're supposed to keep them when they were given to us in the first place. And from this lesson tonight, again, to highlight and to emphasize the sexual education and aspects of the law that the Lord gave us is beautiful. When I had to read and go through all of this, and then understanding that the law spoke on it, the law expounded upon it, the procedures and protocols to take when you separate, when you clean yourself, when you bathe yourself. It's beautiful in its simplicity to understand why the Lord said to do so. Let's go to Sirach chapter 17 and verse 11.
It's the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 17, verse 11. Besides this, he gave them knowledge.
He gave us knowledge. Go ahead.
And the law of life for a heritage.
He didn't give you the law of death. He gave you the law of life. The brother Kawan put in the chat earlier with the Psalms precept that I will live. He gave us the law of life because if we keep his commandments, we shall live long upon the earth. Skip over to chapter 19 and verse 19.
This is the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 19, verse 19. The knowledge of the commandments of Yahweh is the doctrine of life.
Go ahead.
And they that do things that please him shall receive the fruit of the tree of immortality.
And we should all desire that. Not that we'll never die. It means to live longer. Our days are shortened because we've lost the knowledge of these commandments. And we're not keeping them. But with the knowledge and the acknowledgement of them tonight, we are trying to keep them. And we should be keeping them by the Spirit believing in YHWH to the best of our ability. So, in closing, if there's any, read Quran's precept.
It's the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 6. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations.
Go ahead.
Which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.
The Lord said this and said that nations will say this about us because of the deepness and the profoundness of what Allah expounds on and goes into, and the understanding and its simplicity is why they would say such a people have a law like this. That's the beauty of it. That's why he made us and separated us from the rest of the nations and everyone else, because we're not like everyone else. You're not supposed to be like or want to be like everyone else, because the God you serve is not like everybody else. That's why he's holy. If he is just, if he is set apart, it's because he's not the same, and he's not one with others. He is one only with his people, but separate from everything else. So before we close, is there any more comments? Anything anyone else would like to add? Let's go to the chat.
I got a precept.
Go ahead.
This is Sirach chapter 18, verse 30. Go not after thy lust, but refrain thyself from thine appetites. Let me go. Yep. So to end it off to what Barak brought out, and Shai adding and Captain Shamak adding, we have when our females go through certain issues in life, America, this society it pushes us to not just us in the room, but I'm talking about, our people that's in the world. It pushes that mentality of, laying with your woman when they're on their period. If you pay attention to these rap lyrics, I'm not going to say the rapper's name, but he quoted, "I know you're on your monthly." I'm not going to say the word, but he said, "I know you're on your monthly, but can you suck it?" So right there, you're training up the mindset of our people to where when our women are on their monthly, our men is telling our females, you can still give me fellatio if you're still on your monthly, or I'm not afraid to get a little blood on me. This is what's happening in America. Through the American mentality that's going on is destroying us as a people. So,
See, again, we're given a law for an heritage, and it's called the law of life for a reason. Because when you keep the commandments, you live. The Lord made you to live, not die. He's the God of the living, not of the dead. If he didn't care about you, which is why he gave you the law in the first place, he wouldn't have wanted you to live. He gave you the law to extend and further your life so that you wouldn't take away from it and he would have to judge you. And if it came to be, put you to death and you lose your life as opposed to living and being alive. With that, Amadyu Mapanya Makudam. This is Psalm chapter 111. Praise ye Yahweh. I will praise Yahweh with my whole heart. In the assembly of the upright and in the congregation. The works of Yahweh are great. Sought out of all of them that have pleasure therein. His work is honorable and glorious, and his righteousness endureth forever. He hath made his wonderful works to be remembered. Yahweh is gracious and full of compassion. He hath given meat unto them that fear him. He will ever be mindful of his covenant. He hath showed his people the power of his works, that he may give them the heritage of the heathen. The work of his hands are verity and judgment. All his commandments are sure. They stand fast forever and ever, and they are done in truth and uprightness. He set redemption unto his people. He hath commanded his covenant forever. Holy and reverent is his name. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all they that do his commandments. His praise endureth forever. In the name of Yahweh, Hashem YHWH, the Wadah from Yad, Amen.
Amen. Amadyu Shabbat. Amadyu. Barak. Yahweh Hashem YHWH.
Yahweh Hashem YHWH.
All is everyone knows